In the dim glow of his sprawling penthouse overlooking the glittering city skyline, Alexander Voss clutched the edge of his mahogany desk, his knuckles white as tears streamed down his chiseled face. At 55, the tech billionaire had everything: mansions, yachts, a fortune that could buy empires, yet nothing. His wife's sudden death from cancer 2 years ago had left him a hollow shell, isolated in a world of sycophants and silence. Tonight, on the anniversary of her passing, the loneliness crushed him like a vice. "What's the point of all this wealth if it can't fill the void?" he whispered to the empty room. In a surge of desperate impulse, he grabbed his unlimited black credit card, the symbol of his untouchable empire, and decided to test the hearts of 4 women he barely knew, handing it over with one rule: spend as you wish for 24 hours. Little did he know, one selfless choice would shatter his walls and rewrite his story. Alexander Voss had built his empire from the ground up, a self-made billionaire whose AI innovations revolutionized healthcare. But success came at a cost: endless board meetings, betrayals from partners, and a marriage that withered under the weight of his ambition until Elena's illness forced him to confront his regrets. Now, widowed and childless, he wandered his opulent mansion like a ghost, his only companions the staff who tiptoed around his grief-stricken moods. The idea struck him during one sleepless night. What if he could glimpse true humanity through the lens of unchecked generosity? He selected 4 women from different walks of life, each unknowingly crossing his path in moments of quiet observation. First was Sophia, a 28-year-old single mother he'd met at a charity gala where she volunteered. Abandoned by her child's father, she juggled 2 jobs as a waitress and tutor, her days blurred by exhaustion and the fear of eviction. Her laughter, though rare, lit up rooms, masking the isolation of raising a 5-year-old boy alone. Next came Lila, a 42-year-old widow like himself, whom he'd encountered at a support group he attended incognito. Her husband had died in a car accident, leaving her drowning in medical bills and the grief of unfulfilled dreams. She worked as a librarian, finding solace in books but struggling with the emptiness of her quiet apartment. Then there was Mia, a 22-year-old aspiring artist, orphan young and bouncing between foster homes before aging out. She'd buskied on street corners near his office, her paintings raw expressions of abandonment, her spirit fierce yet fractured by rejection. And finally, Rosa, his 35-year-old maid of 5 years. A quiet immigrant from a small village in Mexico, she'd fled poverty and an abusive family, sending every spare penny home to her ailing mother and siblings. Rosa cleaned his home with meticulous care, often leaving small notes of encouragement: "Senor Voss, remember to eat," that he dismissed as dutiful politeness. One crisp autumn morning, Alexander summoned them to his mansion under the guise of a philanthropic experiment. Seated in his lavish study, he explained, "This black card has no limit. For the next 24 hours, it's yours. Spend on anything: yourself, others, dreams, whims. Return it tomorrow, and we'll part ways. No strings." Their eyes widened in disbelief. Sophia's hands trembled as she thought of her son's future. Lila saw a chance to escape her debts. Mia envisioned art supplies and a studio. Rosa simply nodded, her calloused fingers brushing the card like it was fragile glass. As the day unfolded, Alexander monitored discreetly through transaction alerts, his heart a mix of curiosity and cynicism. Sophia, overwhelmed by years of scraping by, splurged first: a designer wardrobe, spa treatments, and a luxury vacation booking for her and her son. Finally, something for me, she whispered to herself in the boutique, tears of relief mixing with guilt. But beneath the thrill, her isolation lingered. Shopping couldn't mend the ache of single parenthood or the nights she cried alone. Lila followed suit, paying off her bills in one fell swoop, then indulging in jewelry and a high-end car, symbols of the life she'd lost. "This is my second chance," she told the salesman, her voice cracking. Yet, as she drove home, the grief resurfaced. Possessions couldn't replace her husband's embrace or fill the void of childless widowhood. Mia, the youngest, dove into extravagance with youthful abandon: top-tier canvases, a trip to Paris for inspiration, and even a down payment on a gallery space. "No more rejection," she declared, her eyes fierce. But her spending masked deeper wounds, the abandonment that made her distrust connections, leaving her to celebrate alone in a hotel suite, sketching furiously to outrun the loneliness. Rosa, however, hesitated. Carrying the card in her worn purse, she wandered the city streets, her mind on her family back home. Poverty had taught her resilience, but also a bone-deep isolation. In America, she was invisible, a shadow in wealthy homes. Spotting a homeless shelter she'd volunteered at before, she entered. The director, harried and underfunded, lamented the lack of resources for the influx of families fleeing hardship. Rosa's heart twisted, echoes of her own struggles. Without a second thought, she swiped the card for a massive donation. Food supplies, bedding, medical kits, and even scholarships for the children there. For those who need it more, she murmured. But she didn't stop. Learning of a young mother like Sophia, evicted and grieving a lost child, Rosa arranged housing and counseling. Her acts rippled outward, touching lives she'd never meet. By evening, she'd spent modestly on a simple meal for herself and wired money home, not for luxury, but for her mother's surgery. Exhausted but serene, she returned to her tiny apartment, the card's power untapped for personal gain. Alexander watched the alerts pour in, his cynicism cracking. The first three's choices were predictable, self-preservation amid pain. But Rosa's? Selfless, profound. It stirred something in him, a flicker of hope amid his isolation. That night, as he reviewed the details, he felt a pang of connection to this woman he'd overlooked. Her kindness, born of her own hardships, challenged his walled-off world. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a transformation that would pull him from the shadows. The next morning, the four women returned to Alexander's mansion, each carrying the weight of their choices. The air was thick with anticipation as they gathered in the sunlit atrium, the black card handed back one by one. Alexander, composed on the surface but turbulent within, thanked them curtly. "Your actions speak volumes," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. He dismissed Sophia, Lila, and Mia with generous checks, rewards for their honesty, but his eyes lingered on Rosa. "Stay a moment," he requested softly. As the others left, buoyed by unexpected windfalls that eased their immediate struggles, Rosa stood awkwardly, her simple dress a stark contrast to the opulence. "Did I do wrong, senor?" she asked, fear flickering in her eyes. Poverty had ingrained caution. She braced for reprimand. Alexander shook his head, pulling up the transaction history. "You spent on others." "What?" Rosa's story tumbled out. Her village's hardships, her mother's illness, the isolation of building a life alone in a foreign land. "I've known grief and abandonment," she said quietly. "That shelter, those people are like me. Kindness is all we have sometimes." Her words pierced Alexander's armor. For years, he'd buried his pain in work, isolating himself from genuine connections. Elena's death had amplified it, turning his wealth into a gilded cage. But Rosa's selfless act mirrored the compassion Elena had shown him early in their marriage, when he'd been a struggling inventor facing rejection. "You remind me of someone," he admitted, his voice breaking. In that vulnerability, a bond formed. He invited her to dinner, not as employer and maid, but as equals sharing stories of loss. Over the following weeks, their connection deepened. Rosa, facing her own isolation, found in Alexander a kindred spirit. She introduced him to her world, volunteering at the shelter, cooking family recipes that evoked her abandoned home. Alexander, in turn, opened up about his grief, the abandonment he felt after Elena's passing. Small acts of compassion flowed naturally. Rosa left flowers from the market on Elena's grave during a visit. Alexander funded her mother's treatment, flying her family to the U.S. for reunion. These gestures healed wounds. Rosa's family thrived, her isolation easing with their presence. Alexander felt purpose again, his mansion filling with laughter during gatherings. But challenges arose. Sophia, inspired by the experiment's aftermath, news of which leaked subtly, reached out in struggle. Her son fell ill, medical bills mounting despite her splurge. Alexander, influenced by Rosa's example, helped anonymously, sparking Sophia's own pay it forward. She volunteered, aiding other single mothers. Lila, grappling with renewed grief, found solace in a support group Alexander sponsored, eventually mentoring widows like herself. Mia, her art flourishing, created pieces on themes of connection, donating proceeds to orphanages, her abandonment transforming into advocacy. The circle tightened when Rosa faced a crisis. Her visa renewal denied due to bureaucratic hurdles, threatening deportation and separation from her mending life. Alexander, once detached, mobilized his resources, not with brute wealth, but through compassionate advocacy, hiring lawyers and rallying community support. In the process, he confronted his own emotional barriers, therapy sessions revealing how isolation had stemmed from fear of loss. Rosa's steadfast kindness during this, cooking for him, listening without judgment, cemented their bond. When her visa was approved, they celebrated not with extravagance, but a simple picnic, where Alexander proposed friendship turning to love. "Your choice that day, it saved me," he confessed. Months later, the transformative ripple was evident. The four women, once strangers bound by challenges, formed a support network. Sophia's son recovered. Her life stabilized. Lila found love again. Mia exhibited globally, her art healing others. Rosa and Alexander married in a quiet ceremony, his empire now funding global kindness initiatives. What began as a test of hearts evolved into a testament to compassion's power, small acts birthing profound change, kindness returning unexpectedly to mend the giver. In the end, Alexander stood on his balcony, Rosa by his side, watching the city pulse with life. "Wealth means nothing without heart," he murmured. Their story whispered a truth. In a world of shadows, empathy illuminates, love connects, and humanity endures through the quiet heroism of the selfless. As the sun sets on lives forever intertwined, remember that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in the compassion we share, igniting chains of hope that bind us all in unbreakable humanity. Moral of the story: in a world driven by self-interest, a single act of selfless kindness can ripple outward, transforming not only the lives of others, but ultimately healing the giver in ways unimaginable.